Okay, so in this section, we're going to basically put it all together into a summary. So summary of graphing lines. All of these formulas you need to have memorized for your test. How many of these formulas do you need to have memorized? All of them. Okay, how many people, you guys, how many people have this formula memorized? The slope formula. Abdi, do you have this memorized? Can you guys wait on that and just come and join me, please? Okay, so you need to have the slope formula memorized. You need 2 lines to find the slope. Many of you have already done this before. The slope-intercept form. A lot of you already have the slope y-intercept form memorized. And then what is this one called? The point slope form. What do you need in order to use the point slope form? And the slope. So if I give you 2 points, you can calculate the slope, then you can use either point as your one point, okay? A linear equation in the form ax plus by equals c is standard form, and you need to know how to find the x and the y-intercepts. That's what we were just practicing. Then you also need to memorize graphs of horizontal lines are always in the form y equals a number. Graph of vertical lines are always in the form x equals a number. So you have several problems to try here, and basically this is a really great review. This packet is a great review of all graphing. But let's just do one problem together. So let's say I have the points 1, 3, and 2, 6. Okay, if I wanted to calculate the slope, what I always do, and I always recommend you do, is label this one x1, y1, x2, y2. Then write down the formula and go ahead and try it. So we have 6 minus 3, because that's y2 minus y1, over 2 minus 1 gives us 3 over 1. So what's the slope there? 3. Now, if I wanted to create this equation of the line, so that's just all I've calculated is the slope. If I want the slope y-intercept form, are either one of these points the y-intercept? How come they're not? Exactly. You have to have the point 0, comma, whatever that number is, in order to figure it out. So we would skip this form. If I gave you that the slope is 7 and the y-intercept is 3, could you come up with the equation of that line? What would it be? Yeah, or y equals 3 plus 7x. The slope is always going to follow the variable x. So it doesn't actually matter which order these come in. We usually put the x first and the slope first. But it doesn't have to be written like that. So don't be misled. Now, if we go back to this example right here where I had the points 1, 3, and 2, 6, and I wanted to find the equation, I've calculated the slope. So the slope is 3. I already calculated that slope. Which point do I have to use in the point slope form? Do I have to use one of them? Does it matter which one I use? No. So I always prefer to pick the points that are easier. 1, 3, to me, those numbers are a little easier, but you could also use 2, 6. So we're just going, here's our x1, here's our y1. We're literally going to just plug those in. So we have y minus 3 equals 3 times x minus 1. Does everybody see where I got those numbers that I plugged into that formula? Now, usually that is done. That is point slope form. But if I want to get it into slope y-intercept form, what could I do to get the y by itself? What would I do first? Yeah, before I do that, I would actually want to distribute, right? So I have y minus 3, I should say, is 3x minus 3. Does everybody see where I got that? And now what would I do to get y by itself? You said add this 3. So I get y equals 3x. Is that it? Plus 0? So what's the y-intercept then? What is the y-intercept? I don't see a number there. The slope is 3. What's the y-intercept? 0, 0, 0. So the y-intercept on this one is 0, 0. I asked that question because for whatever reason, 0 seems to throw people off the most. And a lot of people will tell me there's no y-intercept. No, there is. It's just crossing at 0. So the idea is that you have an implied plus 0. You know what I mean? Everywhere you go, actually, you have an implied plus 0 with you. So next time you feel lonely, you just look over fondly at your plus 0 that you can't see because it's implied, right? You're never alone with your plus 0 around. All right, so standard form. Standard form is really nice when you have an equation. Let's just make one up. 3x minus 2y equals 6. It's really nice when these numbers are all divisible into that number 6. Because if I want to find the x-intercept occurs on the x-axis. And who remembers what the equation for the x-axis is? Y equals 0. So when we find the x-intercept, we set y equal to 0. If I set y equal to 0, what happens to negative 2y times 0? Or negative 2 times 0? It's 0. So to find the x-intercept, I set y equal to 0, and I would solve 3x equals 6. What would x have to be then? 2. X equals 2. How did we get 2? Yeah. 3 goes into 6. We divide both sides by 3, right? And we get x equals 2. That ordered pair is then 2, 0. So that is the x-intercept. I liked when I saw an example earlier of a student coming up. They wrote x-intercept, y equals 0. That's a good reminder of how to solve that. Now, if I want to find the y-intercept, who can remember what is true about the y-axis, or what's the equation for the y-axis? X equals 0. So we are going to set x equal to 0. Now, if I put 0 in for 3, what do I get? What's 0 times 3? I'm sorry, if I put 0 in for x, I didn't mean put it in for 3. If I put 0 in for x, 3 times 0 is what? 0. So I will end up getting negative 2y equals 6. Does everybody see why I end up getting that equation, negative 2y equals 6? I have to take that sign with the negative 2, with the 2, right? What am I going to do to solve for y? Who can tell me what y equals? Yes, because I'm going to divide. Y equals negative 3. So this would mean that I have 0, negative 3 would be my x-intercept. So if I have, my y-intercept. So my x-intercept was 2, my y-intercept was negative 3, and I only need those 2 points. And then I will always have a checkpoint. Because if I got something wrong, one of the most common errors with finding this y-intercept are a lot of people are going to leave off that negative in front of the 2, and they'll end up getting y equals 3. If I graph y equals 3, which is 1, 2, 3, up here, you see how I have a completely different line. You see what I mean? So that's why it's so important when you're graphing using the intercepts, you always, always, always want to have a third check point, okay? I'll make sure those are in the instructions, and that's why when it comes to your final, you want to make sure you read the instructions very carefully. Now, just like we said, the x-axis is the same thing as y equals 0. So any line that's parallel to that is going to have a 0 slope. If I go up 1 or 2, let's say this is y equals 2. So all horizontal lines will always have a 0 slope because there's no rise, there's only run. And what kind of slope do vertical lines have? This is the vertical axis or the y-axis, which we said is the equation x equals 0, undefined slope. So an undefined slope of a vertical line. If I shift over here, let's say this is x equals negative 3. Any vertical line is always going to be in the form x equals a number. Okay? And again, all of these things you're going to want to have memorized. And in order to memorize them, you need to make sure you do at least 300 problems. So if web work is not enough, go in the book. There's tons of problems in the book, right? Online. Even problems embedded within the book. So make sure you get enough practice. And right now, you can